Good glasses.
All right, so let me click on the live button. Here we go. All right, it is preparing our live stream. And it says we are live. All right. Hey, everybody. Hello, hello to my evolutionary entrepreneurs. I am here with a friend, Jay Razzouk, who is a California-based attorney with over 10 years of experience litigating across 20 states in matters involving legal compliance at Fortune 500s. He's also an adjunct professor at La Sierra University and the founder of ProSCALE Legal Coaching and the SecureSCALE method. Jay now helps small business owners employ legal strategies to protect their business as they scale beyond 7 and 8 figures. So I wanted to bring Jay here. Him and I connected through another organization. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I would love to share his brain, his wealth of knowledge with all of you, because I have had clients I wish I would have consulted an attorney. I wish I would have, and it doesn't have to be that way, right? So let's focus on doing it the right way so that you can avoid the legal trouble that could come later. Like I wish I would have known when I published my very first book. I looked up the trademark for everything else except this one phrase. And then I had to republish my book because I got a nasty notice in the mail. They were very nice about it. But had I hired someone to do the research for me or to do all of that stuff, could have saved me a lot of trouble. And we will actually talk about that a little bit later today as well. But so welcome, Jay. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your knowledge with our evolutionary entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me, Elaine. And it's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to this this chat because I think we have some really great questions that I just can't wait to answer because I get asked these all the time. And some of them have great answers. Some of them are going to take a little bit of myth busting because there's a lot of bad advice out there too. So I can't wait to really help steer people in the right direction.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm not giving anybody legal advice. That's really very specific to your circumstances and you need a lawyer in your state to do it. But I hope I at least can point you in the right direction, get you thinking in the right way.
Yeah, so this is not legal advice, everybody. So I have asked in our group and in another group that I'm in that are focus on entrepreneurship, some questions like if you could pick a lawyer's brain, what would you want to ask them? And so I have gathered these questions and Jay has agreed to answer these questions for us today. So the first question that we're going to talk about is the difference between an sole proprietor, LLC, and S Corp, and which one is better, and how do you determine how you should set up the business structure? Do you have any non-legal advice to give to people?
So first, I'll try to just briefly explain the difference between each of those, and then I'll talk a little bit about picking the right one. Definitely, those are two separate but very great questions. So first, there's there's 4 different types of businesses. There is the sole proprietor, which that is where you and your business are one person. You are doing business as yourself. So if something goes wrong, you're personally on the hook. So the great thing about sole proprietor is you don't have all these upstart costs. You're not having to form a separate legal entity, and you don't have ongoing maintenance costs. And for that, like in California, it's $800 minimum per year. Whether you have an LLC or corporation, whether you're $1 million in the hole, or if you start making more money, then you pay even more. So it's quite a lot of money just to have a legal entity, especially if you're in states like California. So there's nothing wrong with sole proprietor, especially if you're like just a hobbyist, you're just getting going, and things like insurance would probably go a lot further than maybe even forming an LLC or corporation. So then the next type of legal entity, let's say, is a partnership. And a partnership is very similar to sole practitioner or solo
proprietor. I know
proprietors.
it's such a word.
And I represent sole practitioners too. That's a different thing. So think of just a partnership as multiple individuals coming together. And if it's just a plain vanilla partnership, it's just two people now as themselves doing business together. And them working together now is that partnership. And then we have different types of partnerships, like limited partnerships, limited liability partnerships, and on and on and on, all sorts of different types. Basically, though, that's people coming together, and sometimes different people might be able to be more protected. Like if you're just going to be an investor, you're just putting money in, you're not going to be managing it, then maybe a limited partnership makes sense, and you protect those investors. Then you have an LLC, or actually, before I get to LLC, let's jump to the corporation. So the corporation, this is kind of that juggernaut of the business. When we think of the big, huge businesses in the world, they're corporations. And corporations are great for scaling and getting bigger and really large. They're great for, just turn around and selling your business. When you're investing in something, corporations are great because there's a lot more protections for investors, which is probably why they're the instrument for going public. But the flip side, because you have all these investor protections, it's a lot more maintenance to keep up. You have to have annual meetings, need to make sure you have board of directors, you're keeping minutes, all these things. So there could be good reasons to go with corporations. I personally use corporations. I love them. And there's been things I've done where I've been so grateful at the end of the day, oh, wow, if I had an LLC, I would have been screwed here. So there's good pros and cons with with corporations. But then in the let's say middle between a partnership and a corporation is the LLC. And if you understand the weaknesses of the partnership, where almost always someone is going to be personally liable. And on the flip side, you have the corporation where the owners are completely separate, and the owners don't face any liability whatsoever, personal liability. The LLC sort of marries the benefits of both. And partnerships have so much flexibility, which an LLC has. Partnership has the liability protection like a corporation has. So that's why a lot of people, I think, at the end of the day say, just go with an LLC. And you don't have to have the board meetings. You don't have to have a board of directors. You can make it anything you want. But that's the flip side to it, though, because you can make it really complicated. You can really have a fancy schmancy LLC that's more complicated than a corporation. So it's whatever you want. It's just like a blank slate that you can do amazing things with. So a lot of people starting off, LLCs might be great.
Yeah.
This is why you often hear about it, because you just start off in your general, okay, I see so many people who start making a corporation and they only like halfway form it. And they skip all these important steps that if they got in a lawsuit, maybe someone might argue, well, your corporation still doesn't exist yet, or you're not personally protected because you only have like a halfway formed corporation.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that really prompted me to go into an LLC formation was taxes. And when I was a photographer, I was a sole proprietor until I started making really good money. And then all of a sudden my tax bill like tripled. And I was like, no. And so my CPA was like, I'm like, how do I prevent this from happening again? Like, what do I got to do? And he was like, well, so my person helped me set up an LLC and an S Corp just to be able to, and she does my payroll. Like she will like actually pay monthly taxes for me and stuff like that, so that I do not.
And you're on payroll.
Yeah, I know. I'm on my own payroll. I actually pay myself. Like that is something that took me a long time to do, but she helped me kind of like how to set that up. And so make sure that not only do you have, someone legal looking at your stuff, but also a certified CPA or something like that to make sure that your books are done properly, that you are paying taxes properly, because trust me, you do not want that tax bill when it comes to, paying tax. It will bite you in the ass and you will not be happy.
Yeah.
So trust me on that.
And I'm glad you brought up taxes. So, because I just talked about business entities. So
Yeah.
I mean, think of a business entity as sort of this separate person. In the eyes of the law, if you create an LLC or corporation or partnership, it is a separate person that can get sued in court, and also a separate person that might be subject to taxation. And when we talk about S corporations, that's actually a type of taxation. It's not actually a type of legal entity. So you could form an LLC, you could form a partnership or a corporation, and you can elect, you can choose, you submit a form and tell the IRS, please tax me as an S corporation. And what it does is exactly what Elaine said, which is you put yourself on payroll and you then are taxed just like an employee and treated just like that. And then any extra money left over for your corporation then spills over to your personal income, but it's not taxed as self-employment.
Yes.
Or it's not treated as self-employment income.
Yeah.
And if you're not familiar with that term, self-employment income, you need to learn about it. This is one of the biggest differences when you go from being an employee to self-employed, because when you're self-employed, all of your money is going to be subject to what we call FICA taxes, which is your Social Security and your Medicare tax. Now, Social Security caps out around 130,000. I forget what it is now. It increases every year. But the Medicare tax does not have a cap. And so you make $1 million, you make $1 billion. If it's all self-employed, you're going to be paying this extra percentage. And eventually you hit certain tiers and you pay even additional Medicare tax. So to avoid that, to avoid the self-employment tax, you form an S corporation, you pay yourself payroll, you pay the sort of the self-employment tax equivalent for employees on your wages, and then the rest just comes in as normal income. And
yep, it literally was the best thing I did for my business, because I was, I was like, oh my gosh, like, had I been smart enough to talk with a legal representative or something like that, like when I started and like started growing and things like that, it could have saved me a huge headache. So make sure you guys that you talk with someone and, get in touch with Jay and he can help you with that. So.
And I like what you said too about having an accountant help, because really I always ask everybody too, do you have an accountant? Because accountants could be a fraction of the cost of an attorney. Yeah. And the accountants really help you on when it comes down to picking the right legal entity and what you should do, a lot of it does come down to taxes. And your accountant can help you with a lot of that. Yeah. And so really, really recommend talking to them. And you might find that it's okay to start off not as an S Corp, because putting yourself on payroll is a little bit more hassle. There's a little bit more cost involved with it. So this is why a lot of accountants tell people only when you're making around 30,000 to 70,000 do you consider switching over to an S corporation. Yeah. And you could always make that switch. So it's not like you're stuck for the rest of your life. You could choose when to submit the form to the IRS.
Yep, absolutely. So let's talk about solopreneurs and protecting solopreneurs. So if you don't have employees, if you are the only one, and maybe you're a coach or something like that, how can we protect ourselves? Like, is there, do you recommend getting insurance or anything like that? Like, how can we protect ourselves if we, don't have this big giant corporation and we're just a solopreneur or a sole proprietor or something like that? But what do you recommend?
I definitely recommend, well, you really have to look at your industry and what you're doing. So for example, professionals need to carry some sort of like professional liability insurance. If you're a doctor, if you're attorney, there's going to be different issues involved with it. But like for example, I work with a lot of coaches, and the coaches, what you're doing is you're providing people with information. And so there's a type of insurance that covers you when you're providing information, advice to people, and that's called errors and omissions. So errors and omissions insurance. And again, every insurance company might use its own terminology. which makes insurance so confusing. You look at one company, call it X, another company calls it Y. Like, what's what? I recommend finding an insurance broker who understands it and can help you make apples to apples comparisons and guide you through the process. But that's usually the starting point. There is, I think, errors and omissions. Like if you're giving advice to people, if you're a professional, you need to get what your profession requires. If you have a facility or premises where people come, or if you go to other people's facilities, you also might want to look at having some sort of general liability insurance that would also cover injuries that could happen on site.
Yeah.
And then if you have employees, now you have to have a whole lot more insurances too, like workers' comp, disability, unemployment. So
Yeah.
it's just generally good to make a relationship with a broker who can just hook you up with everything.
Yes. And kind of predict and really think about the things that we may not even think about, completely
Exactly.
agree. So the next question we got were about people that are in direct sales, network marketing, things like that. And so, typically a company, here's buy a kit and now all of a sudden you have a business. And so are there things legally that you think that they may overlook when they're starting their business, that maybe things people don't think about? How can they protect themselves? Like if the product, let's say that someone buys makeup, just for example, someone buys makeup and they have a horrible reaction. And can they go after the direct seller, or is that a company issue? Like I know that my friends that have direct sales company always worry about the legal liabilities and things like that may come back to bite them in the butt.
Well, usually with direct sellers, I think usually, to simplify things, I look at 5 business risks. Like all major legal issues, I think can fall in one of five of those. So one is regulatory risk. So if you're selling certain items, maybe there's going to be special laws involved. Like if you're selling guns, you're going to have to follow the special gun laws.
Yeah.
And if you're selling explosives or whatever, you need to look it up. But if you're just selling shirts, things like that, maybe you're much less regulated, you're going to be fine. So at least just be familiar with what's there for your industry. So that's regulations. The second one is going to be taxation risk. So direct sellers, you need to make sure that you're paying attention to your sales taxes obligations. Those of us who are just service providers, usually we don't have to worry about taxes. But yeah, once you're selling goods to people, shipping stuff, you need to then have a permit in the states that you are selling stuff. So that's another level. You got to figure out what states are you doing business in, and you have to register and start collecting and forwarding the sales taxes. And if you're involved with Amazon, for example, sending through there, Amazon now has a whole process, lots of information to really help you figure this out, because they've gotten in trouble, by sort of facilitating sending stuff without collecting the sales taxes. So I almost recommend that if you're just starting, maybe start off on Amazon or some platform that already has this stuff figured out.
Yeah.
So after taxes, then contractual risk is a big one. 30% or 1/3 of all lawsuits against small businesses are for breach of contract, and that's more so than any other type of lawsuit. So that means you need to really make sure that when you're promising something, you're going to deliver on it. And that includes, especially for direct sellers, your delivery terms. That's very important. If you say you're going to ship by a particular date and it's going to arrive by a particular date, you need to make sure that you meet those, because we have we're seeing increasing numbers of people just using their credit card chargeback option, where they go tell the credit card, oh, my item hasn't arrived yet, cancel it, give me my money back. And that could be a ding to your record, make things a lot harder for you. You're losing money, and that good could be still in the mail, perhaps. So
right.
You want to make sure you really master delivery. The other risks would be general liability, like I talked about. But so if you have a store, you need to make sure that your store is safe, that people can walk on site, not slip, not get injured. And that's tough because there are people I know businesses where people just pretty much intentionally go, fall, and get hurt, and they sued like every major business in the area. But if you have good video logs and documenting everything well, hopefully you can really keep yourself safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where insurance again really comes in, general liability insurance to cover you. And so those are I say the major risks that right there that you got to watch out for as the seller.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, some of the direct sales, I've heard of a couple of the direct sales companies have been, they're being sued. Like, for example, I know LuLaRoe has a lawsuit where they are being accused of being a pyramid scheme. Right. And so, I felt really bad for the people who bought into that, and, but you never know, like if someone decides they're going to get mad and they're going to try to come after the individual who is representing that company. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but goodness sakes, like, can you imagine being held responsible for something that really wasn't your fault,
Talk about because of people below you.
Yeah, like the, I had seen that there were people who the company was not giving back the money, or they were not adhering to their return policies. And it was really causing this huge hoopla. And it was actually Washington State, my state, actually declared them as a pyramid scheme. So it was pretty
Wow.
It was pretty fascinating. And so I'm like, I wonder if it's like, state by state or something like that. But it was like a Washington thing happened. So somebody must have taken them to court here.
Yeah, or if you get enough complaints in a state, then a state attorney general will take up the cause. So that has to be pretty bad for them to want to get involved.
Yeah.
And that gets into what I recommend to everybody. I mentioned regulatory risk, and that's scary. There's so many laws. We have thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of laws on the books at this federal level and each state level. And it can be overwhelming, but at the end of the day, if you really simplify and boil down all those laws into a few principles, it's don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't kill. And if you're mindful of that, you really realize it's easy to navigate for the most part. Now, there's still little nuances here and there, but if you just focus on what I call having enlightened thinking, and to me, the ultimate enlightened thinking is just having a loving mindset where you really care about the people around you, care about your employees, you care about your customers, care about your vendors. You treat them with love and respect, kindness, you're patient. You spend time to understand where they're coming from, their concerns, and try to work out compromises that address those. For the most part, you should be fine. Almost every lawsuit I've seen, it's just, there's so many missed opportunities, or someone just was so almost blockheaded. I'm just gonna, assert my rights. I'm gonna be as mean as I can be and get away with as much as I can, forcing the other person to go through the hassle of finding an attorney, and then from there it blows up into a bigger thing. So really, you have a lot of control to make a person feel safe, feel loved, feel appreciated, all that, and that will save you so much time. You will not need to see a lawyer, except for in the rare circumstances when you're maybe dealing with a sociopath.
Right. Good advice there. So let's talk about contracts. So you had mentioned earlier that, breach of contract is like one of the main reasons why entrepreneurs are winding up in court. So when do you need to have a contract? When do you not? And if you are in need of having a contract, what's like the most important elements that contracts need to have in order to be valid or to hold up in court?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So first, we should talk about what is a contract. And a contract is really just an exchange of value. So a person giving value for other value. And sometimes it might not be immediate. I mean, like in a store, when someone walks in, they take the object and they hand cash. So that's an immediate transaction. That there's still a contract involved there. But it's not written, right? The price is listed, if you pay enough, you pay the requested price, you're going to get the selected good. You can have oral contracts. Oral mean it's just spoken. You have some sort of understanding between you two. Maybe that's appropriate sometimes, right? We always talk about in the old days, where you just by a handshake.
Gentleman's agreement.
Yeah, gentleman's agreement, right? There's some people who, are very successful doing huge transactions, all oral, but, they have people that they know, they trust, they have a history with, and it works out fine. I don't really suggest that for, your general services that you provide to the public. Definitely not. So especially if you're a service provider, or even if you are a direct seller, you want to have your terms up front. You want people to know what to expect. And really it's all about expectation management. Someone gets sued for breach of contract because someone had an expectation and is not being met. And they're saying you promised, you're not delivering. So you want to put your promises up front. You want them to be clear, accurate, consistent with your marketing. And then you guide people through an entire experience, an entire process that's 100% consistent with what you promised, if not deliver more than what you promised. And that's how you're going to avoid those lawsuits. And elements for a contract, there's no magical language really to make a contract. Lawyers use these fancy terms and these redundancies and things that make it sound like, oh, this is really fancy and formal. No, you could just use plain English. But what's really important is to make sure that it's understandable, that you don't have these words that can be subject to 2 or 3 different meanings.
Yeah.
And sometimes, unfortunately, the location of a comma can affect the meaning. We always joke about that, right? Disputes over a comma, but it can change the meaning. It really can. So that's where a lawyer has to get involved. They can spot these little nuances. So if you have a client agreement, if you are selling something, if you have a website, you need terms of service, it's good to have an attorney there to make sure it's not ambiguous. Now, one of the most important terms to have is going to be like the price. So if you're selling goods, you want to make sure you have the price term there, the quantity people are ordering, what's the product. If it gets to a point where you're missing so many terms, the judge is going to say, I don't even know what you guys agreed to. I don't know what you are supposed to give this other person and how much they're supposed to pay. Like if it's just so not clear, a judge will only go so far to guess what you intended. Like a judge doesn't want to even guess. So leave out the guessing game. Make your contract as clear and precise upfront. Guide people's expectations, and then just deliver on them. That's my advice to everybody.
Yeah. And you have templates, don't you, for contracts and stuff like that to really make it easy for people?
That's right. So I've started with a client agreement right now. What I'm offering, where I went through 20, 30 different client agreements, looked at, the good, the bad, the ugly, all the holes in them, and just rewrote it from scratch using what I believe is the best, latest standards for contract writing to, plug those holes, make sure everybody's clear, understanding what's going on. And when it comes to contracts, there's what you must have, and then there's what you should have, I think. And a lot of contracts should have clauses that really help identify, we'll talk about who owns intellectual property, who owns the rights to use whatever you're giving them. Is it just they themselves can use for a period of time? Can they turn around and share with their friends? Those of us who are coaches, we only want that one person to sign up for the class to be able to use those things.
Right.
So you need to spell that out. And then if there is a problem that comes up, do you want someone to just immediately be able to run to court? Or do you want to provide multiple opportunities for you and your client to communicate with each other to try to work things out?
Yeah.
And then maybe if you want, leave going to court as an option, or require arbitration.
Right. Yeah. I'm a firm believer of talk it out. Like, I'm not a mind reader. And if I've done something that is not meeting your expectation, you got to let me know, because I'm not a mind reader. Right. And I think that
Exactly.
we are so quick to, I'm going to sue you, instead of just like, what is there has to be a compromise, right? There has to be a way to work things out without going to the extreme of, okay, I'm going to sue you, so I appreciate that, because I'm, communicate, right? You can always work
Exactly.
things out. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I have so much in the contract just encouraging people to communicate when certain situations arise.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned photos and copyright and things like that. So let's talk about that. So let's say someone posts a photo on Facebook, right? And someone else downloads that picture and now starts using that as advertising. That's not okay, right? Like, what are the rules about using photos online? What do business owners need to be mindful of before they decide to do something that could get them into trouble?
So in America, we do have this beautiful concept that people should be able to reap the rewards of their labor. And one of those ways that plays out is, if you take the picture, you make a picture, you make a graphic, you make a song, you write a book, you should be able to have special property rights attached to it. And those rights include, you control how it's copied, who can have access to it, how can it be edited, performed, displayed. Like, there's so many different aspects to what a copyright is. And you as the creator have all these rights and can choose who can make the benefit of it. That's how you could then monetize it. You can get back your efforts. And so when you go and just download some random picture, it might be a picture that someone just has on the website for themselves, and you are now denying them money that they are entitled to. Maybe they don't want you to be able to use that photo. They want that photo only used on the website. Or maybe they're selling it on a website and want you to pay money for it. And it basically is theft
Yeah.
to use someone's photo without their permission.
Mm-hmm.
And really, that's how the law more or less sees it too. And what you need to do is make sure you are using photos that people have given permission for you to use.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you need to buy that permission. So you could go on a Shutterstock, or you could go to different websites and, buy the right to use that photo.
Mm-hmm.
But we now have amazing sites where people are posting beautiful pictures for free. So if you go and you look at, for example, Pixabay,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's another one.
Unsplash is another good one.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
I really like Unsplash. I think it's
Me
even
too.
better than Pixabay.
Yeah.
And if you look at those websites, the content creators are posting under what's called a Creative Commons license. And this Creative Commons license is sort of this open source movement where creators can say, I'm going to post my picture and I'm going to say it's Creative Commons, and there's multiple levels of it. So some Creative Commons say you need to give attribution. You need to say, special thanks to the person who provided the photo. But there's some where it might be no attribution. Those are the ones I use because I know I'm not going to get around to thanking the photographer.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing to be mindful of is whether it's only for personal use, like for you put on your own personal Facebook page or Instagram, or is it for commercial use?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to use it for your business, you need to make sure you have permission to use it for commercial use.
Yep.
Now, every photo I've looked at on Pixabay and Unsplash so far, well, maybe not all of them Pixabay. I think you could do a search to screen out. You want to make sure that they're non-attribution and that commercial use is okay. And most of them I think are.
Yeah. Yeah. So the moral of the story is just don't go Google a picture and then find something and then use it in a way that you don't have permission to do. So go to sites that are, you can even use Canva, right? And you can either pay for Canva Pro or you can pay $1 to use like a premium picture, right? That basically is giving you that permission, but everybody's so cheap and they want to just do everything for free. So either do it the right way or face the consequences of using someone's photo without their permission and getting yourself in trouble.
And I should give one important caveat, because for the direct sellers out there, if you're like making mugs and putting pictures on them and t-shirts with pictures on them, those usually require a very special, what's called an extended license.
Yes.
To give you special permission to even make objects with those pictures on them.
Yes.
So be mindful of that. You really need to read the fine print of what you're allowed to use that photo for when you download it, whether it's free or even if you're paying for it. A lot of the paid photos still don't give you permission to just, slap it on a mug, a shirt, or something like that.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So you have to like do unto others, right? As you would have done to you.
Exactly.
Like, don't do things that you would get mad if someone else did to you. So then our last question is copyright versus trademark. What's the difference? And how, like, I know because I was a photographer that, copyright stays with the person who created that piece, right? Trademarking is completely different. So what would you say are the main differences between copywriting and trademarking?
So at its core, a copyright is aimed at protecting an expression of ideas. And a lot of people think it protects the ideas themselves. Like you write a book and all your ideas in there are yours. Nope, sorry, that's public. You can't copyright an idea. But that wording of those ideas are yours. Or for example, the picture, right? You snap a picture of a bird on a tree, like anybody else can go and take a picture of that bird on a tree. But that particular picture from that angle at that moment with that lighting, that's yours. You create it, you own it. That's your own unique artistic expression. So, and as I mentioned, then there's all sorts of different copyrights that control the distribution, the copying of those rights, and you could give people a license to use your copyrighted work. Mm-hmm. Now, a trademark, depending on, there's different philosophies on it, but one is it's not necessarily a property right. I mean, for practical purposes, it is, but the gist of a trademark is the government says we don't want consumers to be confused about the source of goods or services. When you go and buy a Mercedes, you should have confidence that that car with the Mercedes symbols on it is actually Mercedes. Or you go and buy a Calvin Klein dress or shirt, you want to have confidence that that CK tells you for sure it came from Calvin Klein. And so when you now are out selling goods and services, you should, if you're using a particular name, particular logo, something that really sets apart your goods or services, you can now potentially go and get trademark status for these. Now, I should clarify, the copyrights and trademarks are similar in that by creating it, or copyright, you create the copyright, you have it, or the work, you create the work, you have the copyright. You don't have to register it. If you want to enforce your rights, then you need to register it. Similar principle with trademarks. By using your name, using your logo, using whatever the mark is in interstate commerce. So if you're online and you're providing coaching services to people all over the US, you're engaged in interstate commerce, and by advertising your services with that logo, you have the trademark, assuming nobody else is using it before you. Mm-hmm. And that's what's key. You got to be first in that particular area. And what I mean by that particular area, that category, take Apple, for example. Apple computers, like that Apple logo that they have, or that name Apple, they own it in the computer space. But you could probably think of other places where there might be other Apples. Maybe there was, I was just going to say cars, but Apple's now going into cars.
Oh, they are? That's crazy.
Yeah, there's going to be an Apple car in the near future.
Wow.
But let's say there was Apple t-shirts. right? Apple computers wouldn't be able to stop Apple t-shirts if Apple t-shirts was like the first one there using that name and beat them to it. So you really, it is this analysis of, okay, is there someone in this particular space using the same or similar name as me? And if you're the first and there isn't someone before you, you're using it, you have that trademark protection. And if you see someone else using it, you absolutely need to take action and stop everybody else from using the trademark you're working hard to develop.
Yeah.
If
a lot
you
of work.
don't stop. Yeah. And if you don't stop others, then they gain the right to use that name too.
Right. Yeah.
And
so you need a lot of lawyers if you're going to trademark anything, because you're right. If you don't enforce it, then basically it's like an easement, right? After so long, it just becomes public domain, and you haven't stopped me from using this driveway before. Like, why all of a sudden are you complaining about it now? So like, you have to be able to enforce it. Otherwise, what's the point?
Exactly. So when you get those mean letters from someone else saying, hey, you're encroaching on our name, it's not that they necessarily want to be bad people. They're also required to protect their name to send you that letter and stop you from doing it, or else they lose their rights too.
Right.
So you got to be proactive. You got to watch it. So many people, think, oh, I just registered my trademark, I'm done. I paid my attorney's fees, it's over. No, you need to continue to monitor, or we call it policing your trademark.
Yeah.
And the same thing with copyrights. You really need to police your copyrights.
Yep, absolutely. Oh my gosh. So can you tell more people where they can connect with you? How can they learn more from you if they want to hire you? Like, how can you kind of give people the rundown of what that looks like and where they can find you online?
So I think everybody right now, you're watching on Facebook, and that's a great way to connect with me. I have a Facebook group called Business Law for Online Practitioners. Business Law for Online Practitioners. And I actually really recommend that you jump into that group, because when we're talking about, LLC, S Corp, what are all these things? I have at least 5 to 6 videos where I systematically take people through the process of figuring out what's the best one for them. Because they could all be good, but they could also some could be wrong for you. It's like a shirt, what's the best shirt size? The question is, what's the best size for you?
Right.
So I take people through that, and I'm looking at potentially pulling those videos down at some point and make it a paid workshop. So I encourage you to go and watch it now if you're trying to figure out what you want to do business-wise.
Perfect.
And then another way to connect with me is on my website. It is ProSCALElegal.com. So ProSCALElegal.com. And you could get an idea for some of the different services I provide, and we'll just love connecting and seeing how it can help businesses scale securely, because there's so much out there that people just, you don't have time to sit down and figure it out, where I've spent, devoted my life to figuring these things out, and really want to just see businesses go on the right track. Because as you indicated at the very beginning, that was so true. You really need to lay a solid foundation now to make life just so much easier and enjoyable for you down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm really excited. When I had met with Jay, I was like, oh, yep, nope, he has to become a part of the dream team. So he's part of my dream team for the in-source marketing agencies, so that when we have a client and we're helping them grow their business and creating all of their assets and things like that, that we really have that legal brain that can make sure that they are protected, and that they are, not going to be steered wrong. And nobody wants to do it the wrong way and face the consequences. So we want to do it the right way, set them up for success, and not have any of these legal crap that could happen in the future. So I'm really excited to have Jay a part of that. And I want to thank you so much for coming to share your knowledge with the evolutionary entrepreneurs today, so that hopefully we can help prevent more legal catastrophes from
Exactly.
happening in business. And, I know it may not sound like a very exciting and sexy topic, but it is a thing that every single entrepreneur needs to have in their back pocket as someone that they can trust that will not steer them in the wrong way. And let's just face it, asking your friends on Facebook for legal advice, not recommended. Just saying.
Yeah. And, honestly, I think even a lot of lawyers out there give about advice too.
Right.
So
Right.
that's why I'm really trying to get out there this message of just understanding how to really treat people right, because there's so much you can do yourself to really control the situation, dispel disputes, and working with a lawyer to have a well-written contract, definitely do that. But yeah, take control. You can do it. You can make people happy. You can enjoy your business. They will love you. Have customers that just completely adore you, because you're treating them right and well. And I wish more lawyers would communicate that message.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. I will make sure to drop links in the comments so that you can have an easy click and connect with Jay and take advantage of, his group and some of the videos that he has so that you can get educated and make sure that you're setting your business up for success. All right. Thank you guys so much. See you guys later.